Good morning. How you doing, fellow hat nerds? Wow, I'm still hoarse. I'm probably even more hoarse. I got 2 games worth of losing my voice. Unfortunately, the boys in orange and blue could not pull out the win last night, but I still had a lot of fun hanging out with my son and also one of my other buddies that came out last night. So even though we didn't come out on the winning end last night, we still had a blast. Had a few beers. I yelled way louder than I probably had any business to. And then you get this gravelly voice that you're hearing right now. Um, the good news is if you've been following like the live stream, I did promise to get a brand new mic. I actually implemented the mic, the wireless mic that I'm wearing here, this little lapel mic. I implemented it last stream and I think it sounded pretty good. Hopefully you guys agree. Um, I just got like one of the habits that I got into, and hopefully this doesn't sound really vain, is to kind of rewatch my episodes afterwards. Hey, Ian, how are you? How's the weather in London? It is very overcast here, so if London's anything like like my perception of it, it probably is like also. Um, yeah, we got 3 people on the live. Welcome. We got my moderator Morgan Brown and now one of my regulars, Ian. I'm like touched. Got my moderator Morgan Brown and now one of my regulars, Ian. I'm like touched. Now I got regulars. I'm like I got a moderator. I deputized Morgan. If anybody doesn't know, that's why she has a little wrench on her name. At least I can see that. I don't know if anybody else can see the little wrench on Morgan's screen name. That's because Morgan is a moderator. And I'm happy to have you guys. I was just talking about the fact that um, yeah, Morgan says, I shared your live with the great hat maker, Luke. I hope he stops by today. Hey, that's awesome. Morgan, thank you so much. Um, Again, you're just kind of proving every day why, it was a great to have you as a moderator here. Like that I'm touched. Ian says, pleasant weather right here right now, dry and warm. Hey, I'll take that any day, right? I mean, I mentioned that I've attended 2 baseball games. I somehow managed, like, it's been rainy these last 2 days, and it even rained a little bit this morning. Um, so I'm hoping that the baseball gods, whoever's in charge of the weather, baseball gods or otherwise, will shine upon us for one more day. That way we can dodge the rain again. And maybe, just maybe, we'll even get a win. Wow. Like we won 3 whole games in a row before we lost last night by 1 run. So you know what? That's baseball. I had a great time, regardless of the outcome. The nice thing is that the folks at Nats Park, like certain baseball fans, I think you guys know that. Like, so Ian, on your side of the pond, so to speak, I know soccer is a lot more of a bigger sport than baseball. Although I know the Mets did play in the UK. It wasn't last year, maybe it was a couple years ago. So now I've been hearing that there's actually a lot more baseball fans in the UK because Major League Baseball thought to make it part of the schedule to go out into other countries. I think that's brilliant. Again, baseball is not as dynamic of a sport as, let's say, football, basketball. Obviously your version, the soccer, we call it soccer. You guys refer to it as football, but I think that's kind of like, I think that can see the analogy there, right? So baseball's on the downslope, right? Kind of like hat wear, and now you have kind of like almost like a baseball is becoming slowly a subculture. Like everybody appreciates the history of it. Some people watch it because they remember their dad watching the games with the dad or their granddad. And I definitely have that as well. My love of baseball kind of is a family thing first. I just remember going to watch Mets games with my dad over at Shea Stadium, which no longer exists now. Now it's Citi Field, and it was just a vibe. Like when the Mets were winning in the '80s, it was electric. And I feel like the football stadiums or soccer stadiums are just like that. It's just like jam packed with all the people, and hopefully nobody's getting into a fight and doing something stupid, because usually alcohol's involved. So when you put a bunch of guys and alcohol together, you got the form, you have the ingredients, the main ingredients for stupidity, and it just brings out the worst in people, and I hate when that happens. Morgan says it's overcast here as well, Luke. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think this is some of that kind of a byproduct of like Hurricane Erin, I believe. So luckily, it hasn't ruined the 2 baseball games that I've attended. I got another one that I'll probably head out for once I'm done on this live stream. But so again, thanks for bearing with my voice. I think if the trajectory is correct, I might not even have a voice tomorrow. So I'll still try to do a hat chat tomorrow. But I may sound even worse than I do right now. It's just, it's kind of like it kind of goes with it. I think me and my son feed off each other in that respect. And yeah, we just enjoy it. I don't know if that's good or not. Maybe we're pissing off the people next to us. I mean, we're like surrounded by, so there's a good number of Mets fans, but we're in Nats Park. This is kind of like technically our rival. But the thing is, like here in the DC area, I don't know if it's like that in other stadiums. But DC seems to be really friendly because we're so transient, right? I think even if you are not a diehard Nats fan, you probably work with a fan like somebody that's a fan of the Phillies, somebody that's fans of Mets or Yankees, and also a fan of the Pirates in Pittsburgh. Like I said, that's kind of like the majority of the folks that come from a neighboring state. You're talking about Baltimore, so the Orioles, Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey. So you will get a lot of that Northeast action hearing other folks. And I think that's good for them, right? So my money is, even though it's Mets money, it's still money, it's green. And hopefully the Nats folks appreciate the fact that we're dropping money because it's not cheap. I mean, luckily it's one of those things I'm still able to afford to do. And I do it as a bonding thing with my son. So like, just like I bonded with my dad at the ball games at Shea, I go out because we're both in the DC area. My son lives in DC proper, and we managed to get together. And now the nice thing is that usually I always had to pay for everything. Now my son makes more money than I do. So I'm like, yeah, now you buy, right? I'm like, I helped you go through college and get through college. You got a nice job. And now maybe you could buy me a beer, right? That's a great thing. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing, it's one of those things where as a dad, I think I told some of my life story yesterday, but I was a young dad. I think I was 22 when my son was born. So the gift and the curse of that, right? The curse was that I was really young and probably not well schooled in daddom or dadhood or whatever, fatherhood. But nobody's ever really prepared, right? My younger brother happens to be somebody that became a dad in his 40s. Right. So now I get to like benefit from being the, Uncle Luke. And that's great, except that, he has a different thing going on. So he's like 40. And I feel like sometimes I'm jealous of that because, well, I think I would be a much better dad in my 40s than I was in my 20s. But my son's alive. He's well. I didn't break him. Sort of, he's still a little weird, but that's because I'm a weirdo. You know what I mean? I'm like, that's going to happen regardless. It's like, it's in your genes. You are a personality, and you're going to, you're going to do what you're going to do. But it's just interesting to see like how things, when you share same gene pool, you're like, oh yeah, you start seeing yourself, and I'm sure he sees himself in me. I think the only good thing is for him, because, sometimes kids don't like to be like their parents. Even though as you get older, you will find that you will become more like your parents, whether you like that or not. And I think he sees that. I think, thank goodness for him, that I wear these like big old glasses and this fedora. He doesn't. So I think that differentiates me a little bit in look. But I think when people see us and they see us talking, they're like, okay, you guys, and then they'll say something nice like, you guys are brothers, right? And I'm like, come on now, I mean, I appreciate it. Like, keep it coming. But at the same time, I see what you're doing there, right? But yeah, I love it. I'll take it. I would prefer, like I said, right now, I'm not a granddad. And I told you, like, sometimes people will see me with the fedora on. They'll be like, you remind me of my granddad, you know, but, and I'll take that because I got a high level of respect for any older person. It's just the way I was raised. And I just think they're smarter. But the second thing is like the little like vain part of me wants to be Uncle Luke, not Grandpa Luke. You know what I mean? But I will eventually become Grandpa Luke if if history in the trajectory lines up. But I'll be prepared. I'll be prepared to be to Grandpa Luke. I can handle it. I'll do it with grace, hopefully. But hopefully Grandpa Luke would be the guy that does YouTube. I'm like, that's got to be different, right? Yeah. If the stars align, exactly. And there's always plenty of time. Like I said, my younger brother, who's only like a year and a half younger than me, he just happened to become a dad in his 40s. It just didn't work out in his 20s or 30s. But there was like he still has a lot of energy, and I think it keeps him young. And like whatever works. Or if you never have a child, that also works. Like I said, I mean, given my accounting of how much money I spent being a dad, I'm like, it's not, you don't do it for the, you don't, you do that despite the cost that comes with, and my son just happened to play sports. Yeah, it's not for everyone. My son happened to play sports and he played baseball. He was actually a really good ball player. Actually had a chance to play at college level, but didn't work out. He ended up, not doing college baseball, but he's still a really good athlete. And it's fun to watch the games now. Now we're watching professionals play instead of me watching him play. So it's really a treat. So anyway, yeah. So back to the kind of subject. Hopefully everybody's had Morgan. I know you just said that you had a new hat or a new to you hat. How's the new hat treating you? I'm curious because really, like I said, I mentioned before, it's like I start these things off with like talking about my hat, but I really, that's just a straw man for me to get you guys talking about your hats and your hat journey. Because again, I can only talk so much about me before you're like, okay, Luke, we know that. I might still have some fresh stuff for you guys, but ultimately, I will still try to come up with a straw man. But I want to find out more about your hat journey, and that's where they're like, I will get Paul on here. I will get Kevin on here at some point if, again, he's a busy guy, as is Paul. But I will try to get these guests for you guys because, again, I can only give you so much. At some point, you will hear everything there is to hear about Luke, and you're like, all right, give me something new. So Morgan says, I haven't worn it since the day I got it. I'm taking it to Kevin tomorrow to get the brim stiffened. Awesome. Then I will start wearing it more confidently. Hey, that's what it's all about, right? We know that like every hat, right? Like, and I'm just gonna bring this up again because I mentioned before, some people are like they're a one hat person, right? Everybody knows they'll have a signature hat and they might not own another hat. But more often, because luckily we are living in a time where somehow, some way we manage to have the level of I guess affluence and disposable income, we're able to afford more than one hat. So most folks aren't one hat people. We have multiple hats. We have what's now termed a collection of hats. And I just think it's better that way, right? I mean, thank goodness that we have the means to be able to own more than one hat. And it's a blessing, to be honest. But then it opens up a whole host of other problems, right? Now it's kind of like, what hat do I wear? And also, this hat fits me perfect. This other one is not, but I want to make it perfect. I know how to make it perfect. So now, luckily, you can take it to somebody like Kevin, or maybe you have a local hat shop, somebody other than Kevin that you're like, all right, I trust them to do, because it really is a trust, right? You're bringing your baby over, right? It's like bringing your child to a new daycare, right? And you're like, take care of my baby. And then that they will, right? Because they know the process. They know what it's like. It's like, this belongs to Morgan. I'm going to treat it right. And Kevin, I feel like you kind of seen Kevin working, on his videos. Shout out to Kevin and Kevin's Hats and Guitars, on YouTube. Definitely hit him up with a subscribe. He is probably one of the bigger YouTube channels in this genre. and definitely an inspiration for me. And he's just a good guy overall, you know, really knowledgeable guy. Not a hatter in like the old sense, right? Like Kevin doesn't, I think I consider him a hatter, but some people might not because he doesn't make the hat himself. But I think he's every bit the hatter in my mind. And I have no problem calling him one. You know, hopefully that comes across as a reverence to respectful for Kevin, as well as not disrespect for those actual hatters, like, you know, in the traditional sense, like Paul, and every one of the other great hatters that actually handcraft their hats. They're also worthy of lots of respect. You know, I just try to be respectful to everybody, to be honest. And if I don't come across as respectful, it's by accident. It's something that I made a mistake. I just hope that people realize that. I think once you kind of see some of my videos and you kind of know my personality, I think I kind of get that assumption. But maybe sometimes somebody might see me for the first time and I say something stupid and it was not intentional. So just FYI. Anyhow, so we got 3 folks. We've been getting like 3, 4. I think at one point I had 5 people on here. God bless. I never, you know, like I said, when I started this channel, I thought that this could get bigger and I want to make it entertaining. And I feel like I'm going in the right direction, right? So I made an investment in some of the equipment. I saw that my sound was off. So I got the wireless mic. You know, again, I have the ability to invest in the channel because, you know, of my situation right now. But ultimately what's going to happen is, you know, maybe I'll get monetized and, you know, and I'll be able to reinvest the money from YouTube into either getting better hats or maybe what I'll do is maybe some of that money I'll start getting into straw hats and into boater hats. I mentioned that those are holes in my collection, right? I have one straw hat that's really cheapo, but it was a Portland hat, right? I still might profile that hat because it was the one that started it all, right? I got that one in Split, Croatia, and it started me on the hat journey. And everybody has that gateway hat, right? That one that started it. I think with Morgan, she said that she started with the Stetson Revenger. Yeah. Morgan said, I've been discussing with my hat maker about a straw hat. It would be my first ever. Yeah. You know, that's actually a great, Morgan, I think that's fantastic because one, it's such an intricate process, right? Like the folks that know about straw hats and about the weave and having like a tight weave versus not a tight weave, you know, about the longevity. How do you prolong the longevity of your straw hat? That's one of those things where, okay, the one thing that I did get from my folks, my fellow Fedora loungers or Fedora lounge lizards, is that usually you're better off purchasing your straw hat new. And it doesn't mean that's hard and fast, right? You can get a good used straw hat. It's just that when you go vintage with the felt hats usually have a better staying power than a straw hat. Usually, if you really have something that was worn daily in a straw hat variety, you're gonna get some wear and tear that may not translate into secondhand use. So if you're going to buy vintage straw hats, I think you have to be a little bit more choosy. Either a little bit more choosy before you get the straw hat, or you have to kind of be somebody that's willing to refurbish the hat. Either pay for it to get refurbished, if that's even all possible. I don't know enough to tell me. Like somebody that knows better can tell me, yeah, you can't refurbish this, Luke. You can't refurbish a straw hat. But I feel like some people are good at turning something that is somehow not like, I've seen some transformations is what I'm saying. I've seen some folks that are not hat makers really put some elbow grease into a hat and turn it into something that I thought was a goner, into something that I'd be proud to show, let alone wear every day. And I really admire that. So there's no, like I said, there's no one right or wrong way to do this hobby. That's part of the beautiful thing about this hobby. So I'm really excited for you, Morgan, that you're now going to branch out into the straw hat world. And now I'm excited to hear about how that goes. again, the nice thing is, Morgan, because you're opened yourself up to that, now you can go and, like I mentioned before, you can see how it lives, right? You can test out the straw hat world. Maybe it's for you, maybe it's not for you. Maybe you stick with that hat and just have it in your collection and never wear it, or you might just become a straw hat person. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, felts are nice, but that's the old Morgan, right? The new Morgan, the evolved hat Morgan, is now a straw hat person, and maybe that's going to be your new thing. That's the beautiful part about this, is that I didn't have a bowler for when I started off. I never had a bowler, so I wasn't a bowler hat person. I got one, became a bowler hat person. Like, it's part of my repertoire. I'd never had a pork pie at some point. Like, when I started off with standard fedora. I got that straw hat first, and then I got my first fedora, which actually, I think my first felt fedora was that Borsellino, right? And I was pretty touched that I think my first real felt in my collection after that straw hat was my Borsellino, which is, I profiled that on my show, and it was a Borsellino. It's my only Borsellinos till the date that I own. It was a pre-bankruptcy Borsellino from the early 70s to the mid 70s, right? And I have no idea whether that was good. I mean, I haven't really heard about distinctions, right? Borsellino is one of those companies that a lot of people seem to be in agreement that if you buy a pre-bankruptcy Borsellino, you probably got a good one, right? They didn't really have that decline, at least up until they went into bankruptcy. So they managed to maintain a really good quality. And now what we uncovered is that part of that reason was that Borsellino benefited, one, from the decline in competitors, like international competitors, like Hat Corporation of America. And then when they got into issues with supply, they actually reached out, right? That's what you got to do, right? Being part of a hat community pays dividends even when you are a manufacturer. So what happened was Borsellino reached out to Tonac when they had trouble with supply. I don't know when that happened. I do know that it did happen based on my research. But they reached out at some point. Borsellino sourced their felts from Tonac in Czechoslovakia, or now I guess the Czech Republic would be now known as the Czech Republic. But I'm like, that's fascinating to me. And it goes to show you that cooperation, there's more to be gained by cooperation in this hat hobby and in the hat business than there is via competition. Like, meaning you guys would do that, we're gonna go and we're not gonna meet each other. You know what I mean? I'm like, why not? We're now living in a global community, right? Like, the world is now a lot smaller thanks to the internet and thanks to the accessibility of airplanes and air travel. Who knows? Maybe in the next few years, we'll go fully Star Trek and we'll be able to teleport, right? So I'll be like, hey guys, as soon as I'm done with my live stream, I'll head over to Italy and go hang out at the museum, and then I'll come back and stream about it and tell you about it the next day here in the DC area. Wouldn't that be nice, right? I think that would be peachy keen, as they would say back in the day. Anyway, it makes me smile because, like I said, even if I never get to enjoy that, I get to see it on Star Trek. And I'm able to kind of say, wow, man, that would be really cool. I could just put myself in that like headspace, kind of like I do sometimes when I wear, one of my fedoras. I'll be like, I feel connected to a time, to yesteryear, in somehow, some way. And I can kind of put myself in the shoes of somebody leaving their house, post World War II, or maybe sometime after the 60s, right? Because a lot of my hats are from the 60s and some from the 70s. And I'm like, okay, I was born in the 70s, but I don't know what it was like to be around in the 70s, right? I don't know. I talked to my parents and they can remember really well the day that Kennedy was shot, because it was a pivotal moment for folks that grew up in that era, right? That'd be the baby boomer generation. They all kind of can tell you, regardless of where they were in the US and probably even outside the US, the day that Kennedy was shot, right? It was just one of those pivotal moments, kind of like somebody from Generation X could really recall what they were doing when 9/11 happened, right? I know I had just moved into the DC area when 9/11, and I watched, I was going to graduate school. I was my first year of graduate school, and one of my roommates at the time had the Twin Towers on screen, and I literally watched an airplane crash into the towers on live television, and that was surreal for me. And then obviously scared out of my wits because, well, most of my family lives in New York City, right? My younger brother that I was just talking about earlier, was in he worked in Midtown, and I think he was Midtown. I get that screwed up a little bit, but he was one of those folks that had to make the trek and walk on his way back home. And of course, nobody could get a hold of anybody because the cell phone towers could not support the amount of calls that were going back and forth. And unfortunately, we knew that some of those folks were actually those folks that were stuck in the towers, and unfortunately, it met their demise, and just shortly thereafter. So, shout out to all the first responders in New York City. That's something where we kind of like, everybody always talks about New York's finest and New York's bravest and even New York's strongest, right? With the sanitation, that those are like the three main players. But no matter what you think about the police and what you think about your local fire department, nobody went out of that without a new felt appreciation for that sad day and what they did. Yeah, Morgan says it was a sad day, I'm sure. Yeah, Morgan, it just dawned on me that you weren't even live when that happened. But again, you're basically just hearing this kind of like I heard about Kennedy being shot from my parents and for folks that I hang out with and that are older than me, and they're like, yeah, that was a pivotal moment. And I believe that's how a lot of our generations are defined, right? So the baby boomers are kind of defined by being born post World War II. They were like, right, they were born, they were a product of the boom that the US and a lot of other countries experienced post World War II. And then Gen X, I think, probably is defined primarily, I would say, for like being at the forefront of 9/11, even though we had other generations. Obviously, the boomers went through that as well. But those are things, and obviously Pearl Harbor, right? Let's not forget Pearl Harbor. That was another pivotal moment. In many respects, parallels a lot of what 9/11 was. For folks here in the States and obviously abroad. Anyway, we have a lot of sadness in our history. It doesn't mean we need to be sad people, but it does still, the responsibility is to never forget, right? It's kind of like we always come up saying, always remember or never forget. And I take that to heart because, just because it was a sad period in time doesn't mean we try to forget it, right? Our brains are really good at doing that and forgetting bad things that happen to us. And because it helps us get through the day, right? We don't want to be sad all the time, but sometimes we have to kind of come up and see and remember it so that, again, we're able to identify things that we see now that are happening. And maybe there's something we could do about it, right? Maybe we can prevent the next 9/11 just by the fact that it's never something that we forget, right? There are countries like Israel that they don't know anything but like war and like being on guard. But for us, obviously Pearl Harbor was like that first pivotal moment where we got where we experienced some I guess an act of war on our territory, and then 9/11 was the other. I'm sure there might have been something I'm forgetting here, but for me, besides all the domestic terrorism that we've seen, we've definitely experienced that. But Pearl Harbor and 9/11 were forever etched in the minds. It's forever etched in history, and it's forever etched in the minds, in the hearts of those that lived through those moments. I wasn't around for Pearl Harbor. I wasn't around for Kennedy's assassination, but I was very much around for 9/11, and I try to convey that to my son, who was born at the time, but he was way too young to remember. And that way he can kind of like, yesterday at Nats Park, we saluted the military folks. That's one of the nice things also about our DC area is that we do have we are home to the bases of the military forces. We have a lot of part of the transients that come into the DC area. A lot of them are tied to the military. And I always try to be very reverent. I have an older brother that served 2 tours in the Middle East. And shout out to Eli and all the folks that served prior to Eli, served with Eli, and has continued to serve after Eli, my brother Eli, and very much a patriot. And I salute him and all his fellow servicemen for what they did, and doing what they do so that we can enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy now. So yeah, thank you. Morgan says, God bless him. Thank you so much. Eli's a super guy. And now he's enjoying his time post. So he served 2 tours. He also served as a post office worker. I think he's retired now, I believe. And now he just gets to enjoy his time with his son, kind of like I enjoy my time with the son. He's older than me, yet his son's younger than me. I was a young dad. So I feel like that's everybody's I run into very few people that had a son at a younger age than me. Usually have to be really old to like say, oh yeah, I had a son at 18 or 19. Again, I don't recommend it, even though I don't regret it. There are benefits to being a young dad, but there's also a lot of downsides, right? It's kind of like you're making it up as you go along. But it worked out, right? So hopefully my son's working right now. At some point I'll get a text message from him and say, hey, I'm heading out. I'll have to leave a lot earlier because he lives in DC proper. So he has a much shorter trip. I have to actually drive to the metro and then take the metro. And once I get to the metro, and park there, I have to take probably about an hour-long trip to get to the ballpark. But I'm already excited at that point to kind of get the game and to see my son and to just have a good time because that's what it's all about. And with my fedora on, right? Yeah. I don't know if I'll wear this one, right? Because and I'll actually we're already a half hour into this. So I will talk about the hat of the day. I will tell you that this is a hat I don't wear as often. I love this hat. It's just that it's a size 7.5, right? So this is one time I will take off my hat only to show you like what I did. Remember I talked about yesterday about resizing a hat. And you can see here, like in the lining, you can see that little orange, right? You see that little orange, that's just a piece of felt. Because this hat is way bigger than my head size, so you can see it's still like it has a lot of movement. This is a size 7.5. So I wear a size 7 1/8. Maybe I'm somewhere between 7 1/8 and 7 1/4. So 7.5. I don't even know if this is true to size, but it's big enough that it's kind of like, okay, I get very scared, even though it has a trolley cord. Yeah, that's a big jump. Yeah. Well, Kevin was the one that empowered me to do that, right? Remember, I told you I try to buy hats that fit me. But this one was like one of those exceptions that I said, okay, that's way too big for my head, but I need this hat. I gotta have it, right? I gotta have this hat. So I didn't really give a flip. I was like, I'm getting this hat. So I got it. And then luckily in learning in my hat journey, I started off by putting TP. I remember that. I put TP in my hats, my bigger hats before this. But right around this hat is when I started figuring out, okay, instead of using TP, which is still a viable option, like if you don't have access to a piece of felt, TP will do the trick, at least maybe temporarily, right? Because this is a non-permanent fix for downsizing a hat. But a better option that I've had luck with, and this was one of them, is if you go to a local craft shop. I don't know, for the folks that are not that are in the US, you can go to a place like Michael's Crafts. Or any place like that. And I'm sure, again, there's plenty of craft stores in the UK and elsewhere. And just get yourself an access to a piece of a felt material. Maybe you know somebody that works with felts and has some of that. Luckily, I did know somebody. I didn't have to purchase this. Somebody I knew that had just a bunch of material on, had this felt. And I said, you know what, this is great. You know, I gotta buy some. And they were like, well, why don't you just take that? And I'm like, I will. Right? I was like, I will take that. And I thank you. You know, and obviously I tried to offer them money for it. That she would have none of it. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll figure out another way to thank you. And, you know, and that was that. And I got home and now I have this felt material. So like when I go and for the next big hat that I have to have, I now have a little bit of felt material to kind of resize it. And I'll just repeat this over for the people that didn't know or weren't around for that thing. My strategy, and I think this is something that I learned from Kevin and some of my other hat nerds, is that usually when you want to resize a hat down, right? And that's always the easiest way. Going down in size is easier than trying to stretch a hat out. You know, I've never done that because I just don't want. I cringe at like the idea of stretching a hat out. But I got no problem if you do it. I just personally, I don't steam my hats and I don't stretch my hats. If I see a hat that won't fit me, or I don't think it'll fit me, I just won't buy it. Again, I'm sure at some point, I almost made an exception about that last year. I almost bought a Stetson bowler that was like a size 7. Maybe it was under a size 7. So I was like, oh yeah, I told myself I could stretch that out. But then part of me got to me and I said, you know what? No, that belongs to somebody else. There's somebody who would be a perfect fit for that hat. So I kind of did the catch and release, right? I said, thank you, but no thank you. I could buy this, but I'd be taking it away from somebody that could really enjoy it and maybe could enjoy it without even altering it. So I did that. And I think that's a good way to limit your hat, right? I only have so much space. I think I have a pretty good space, you know, and luckily I live with very kind people that allow me to have enough space for my, you know, for my hat collection. So it's not obscene by a lot of standards, but for me, I probably have more hats. I think I'm going to be comfortable in saying that I probably have more hats than I should have. You know, but the nice thing is about, you know, sometimes when I post on Fedora Lounge or I post on Facebook, somebody says, you know, I got to have that hat. I'll laugh because I'm like, that's what happened to me, you know? So conceivably somebody says, I got to have that hat, you know, are you willing to sell it? And it doesn't always work out, right? Either the price doesn't work out or I'm just not willing to sell the hat, but it's no offense. I'm never offended by it. And hopefully the other person is not offended either when I'm like not able to like sell them the hat. But it has happened, you know, multiple times. And, you know, I always feel good in that, like sometimes there's a little bit of that remorse, right? It's like, wow, that was a great hat. But I always go back to like, it's probably in a better home, you know? And also like, you have too many hats anyway, Luke, you know what I mean? I'm like, like that person maybe is going to love that hat way more. Maybe they'll be like somebody that is into steaming and they'll steam the hat nicely and reshape it. And maybe that will be their signature hat, right? You never know. Like for me, I'd be tickled if I sold somebody a hat and it became their signature hat, right? My dad only owns one hat. It's a modern capless bowler that I got for him because it wouldn't fit. I just had to buy it. And it just happened to like, it dawned on me that it was big enough that maybe to fit his head. He's a size 63 centimeters. So that's a much larger noggin. And luckily it was a perfect fit. And my dad still wears that hat. And if you want to see that hat, you can see it, a picture of my dad on the YouTube post. It was the second post. The first one was my granddad wearing his hat. I believe he took that picture when he first got here from the United States, got here from Puerto Rico to the US. And I believe that was in New Jersey. So one of my cousins family members must have snapped that photo. And my granddad, it just was like, I think he forced a smile, but it was kind of like one of those, like, you know, like they probably made him smile, you know, because my understanding of my granddad is that he really was like he's just a really serious guy, you know? And I'm like, all right, well, in my mind, not ever having met him, and it's funny because I love to smile myself. imagining somebody like in my family. But the thing is, it just was something that I associated with country folk. My granddad was a farmer in Puerto Rico. And if anybody that, like, again, I'm ignorant about, I've never been a farmer. I've never grown up on a farm, but my perception of farming people, having them in my family, and then having, of what I've seen and consumed, is that you don't usually get this, like, there's not really like smile, like it's hard work, right? Farming is hard work. So you can't really blame the folks for like being like out there in the middle of a field and just doing this, So anyway, I don't like to do that. I like to smile. I think it's a lot more approachable, and I think it makes me, I think it makes me approachable to folks that are like want to ask me stuff about hats, and curious about where I got my hats and why I wear the hat. Or they'll tell me, yeah, you look like my uncle so and so, right? So yeah. Anyway, smile if you want to smile, I say do it. It's a very good way to meet new folks. I don't always smile. It depends on like my mood, but I try to. Even when I don't feel great, I will try to smile, because I already know the research says when you smile more, your brain somehow sends your brain signals that that you are actually happy, and the brain will turn them on. Apparently, it's like a kind of reciprocal thing, and I think that's fascinating, right? That we're like, even as sophisticated, as sophisticated as we like to think we are. Sometimes we're a lot simpler, right? We're as complex and as simple as you can think. It's like we're more like animals than we give ourselves credit for, or like to think. But we're also a lot more complex. People think that we're so simple. Our brains and our bodies are really, and how they work together, are really quite intricate. And I'm just fascinated by that. The fact that one can smile and feel better just because, it's like chicken versus egg, right? What came first, the happiness or the smile? And it's reciprocal, that, right? It's iterative. Anyway, I'm getting on a tangent. Back to the hat, right? I don't even recall how I got this hat. Maybe I bought it online. It is a Dobbs 20, and that's it. Like, the hat, by any definition, is unremarkable. No, I won't say it's unremarkable. I think it's remarkable, but things like, if you've been on the Fedora Lounge, you kind of know that the Dobbs 20 is one of those, like, people hold it in high regard. So I think when I came across this hat, it already, like, I didn't need anything else, right? I think at that point I was like, I could use a nice brown fedora. And this one looked nice enough. It was dusty. It still is dusty as all get out, right? Because when I got it, I knew it was too big. I sized it down just so I can wear it sometimes, at least around the house. And I, honestly, right before I started the live stream, I saw it and I was like, wow, this thing is still like, it's like caked. It's like caked in there. And I don't like I don't like putting product on my hats. So what I'll do is I'll just get a little bit more aggressive on the brushing. And I'll do it counterclockwise, right? So we kind of know the routine. If you own a hat brush and you're into felt hats, you know that you want to kind of go counterclockwise, right? So if you're new to this, you take your hat and then you go counterclockwise, right? If you need something to remember, you just remember the term countertop, right? So at the top of the felt, you go counterclockwise. On the bottom here of the felt, you want to go clockwise. And I don't think there's exceptions to that. Maybe somebody else knows better. I've never done exceptions to that rule. It's always been counterclockwise on top, clockwise on the bottom, until I hear otherwise. That's going to be the law. At least that's Luke's law. You guys might, your hat, you do whatever you want. But for me, like, I feel like a certain kinship to my fellow hat nerds when I do it the right way, right? And again, even brushing, like, I have too many hats to brush them all the time, right? It's kind of like when you have like 20 cars, right? If you got 20 cars, you're probably not waxing them every day, because who's got that kind of time, right? Maybe Jay Leno doesn't even have that kind of time, right? But Jay Leno probably has that kind of money where he can pay somebody to wax his car every day, right? Shout out to Jay Leno, right? Fellow YouTuber. Even if you're not into cars and you're just into history, I wholeheartedly recommend Jay Leno's channel because, well, even though he's not a hat nerd, he's a car nerd. And I feel like there's a certain kinship between nerds of different ilks. And he's definitely a car nerd. Man, is he ever. He just, besides the fact that he made enough money to be able to develop the collection that he has, he basically has a museum at this point. I think he actually, if it's not a museum, it should be. And I'm really thankful for that, because if he does open up his collection to the public, I think that's going to be a treat for everybody that has just a passing interest in cars. And he has a fine collection. Jerry Seinfeld has a great collection as well of Porsches. I'm not a Porsche guy. I'm not even a car guy. I drive a Corolla. I guess I'm a car guy, but it's really an appliance for me, right? I just like the fact that my Corolla that gets me from point A to point B with very little expenditures, right? I'm able to save money on my car so that I can spend it on hats, right? That's a beautiful thing. So thank you, Corolla. Thank you for being so reliable, even though you're almost 20 years old and you're still running fine. I still got to get you some brakes, by the way. Sorry, Corolla. You need brakes. I will get you brakes. Anyway, I'm talking to my car. Sorry. I'm guilty of that sometimes. But back to the hat. Let me go and do the traditional sharing of my screen. Let's see if I could do this again without breaking anything. Let's see here. Let's see if I can do this. Again, bear with me. I will try to do this without breaking anything. Let's see, Windows. Okay, let's see if it works. Oh, I got the wrong photo here. I will go back. Sorry. I went and apparently I was looking at my, I stole some of my thunder. But you can see, this is how I received the hat. Look at all that dust. I got some of that dust out. Some of it you can still see on this hat as I wear it. But this is definitely one of if not the dustiest hat I have ever had the privilege of owning. I don't know. I mean, I saw these pictures. I think I don't know if I took this picture, if this was the picture of the ad. But this is how this is how the hat used to be. You can see I could probably still have the same, the same bash on the hat. But man, was this when I was brushing this hat earlier this morning, there was still dust coming off of that thing. And I don't know how much of that was old dust versus new dust. Doesn't matter. But you can see that before I even decided that I could even put this on my head, I had to give this a thorough dusting. And I mean, if you're into vintage hats, these are that, and moth bites are something that you have to kind of become accustomed to, right? Because these are vintage, these belong to somebody, maybe somebody that's passed away and it was squirreled away by a family member. And then now they're trying to rehome it because they're like, well, I don't wear hats. Maybe I can make a couple bucks on this and give it to another hat nerd or somebody that would appreciate it and save some space. So I'm again, without knowing the history of this hat, I can only assume that that's what happened. I know for a fact that it's happened when I have a chance to talk to the owner and they'll tell me, hey, this belonged to my uncle. And he's either not into hats anymore or not with us anymore. And I just didn't want to it go to waste. And then they'll find another hat nerd, hopefully like me, and that will give it a better home, I guess, than it currently is in. This one needed a better home. And I was like, you know what? This is a Dobbs 20. At this point, I never had a Dobbs 20, but I had heard so much about how people adore these hats on the Fedora Lounge that I'm like, I got to have one. You know what I mean? I got to have one. And obviously I went and I took the photos. This is not the best photo. Again, I'm pretty sure because it's clear, it's not my photo. But just as a check, you guys can see this, right? I just want to make sure that you guys are seeing this on your screen because, again, I'll go through a whole segment, and maybe I didn't realize that I should have checked to see if one, you can hear it. Okay, good, perfect. All right, somebody's trying to ping me, but I'm going to ignore that. All right, so let's yeah, I would have said something if not. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you for being a great moderator, and thank you again. I'm going to thank you again for sharing this with other folks. Again, no obligation, but I appreciate it. Like, that just tugs at my heartstrings, because it just tells me that you care enough about the channel, or about me, to want to do that for me, and I appreciate it. It doesn't go unnoticed. So yeah, I would have said something. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Morgan. Always feel free. Like I said, if I say something off, I've been corrected here before. I'm not one of those folks that is too good to be corrected. I know fully well that I'm not an expert in basically anything. I know a little bit about a lot of things, or I try to learn. But that's why I do this channel. Part of the reason I do this channel is, one, to provide a venue for budding hat nerds, right? The hardcore hat nerds, they're going to know everything I already said before I even said it, right? And maybe they'll still enjoy me, because sometimes repetition is good. But when I do repeat myself, just know that I'm not trying to annoy you. What I'm trying to do is think about those folks that may find my channel either early or even before they even start their hat journey. And I just feel like I owe it to them to kind of make sure I give them some information. That way they start off on the right foot and maybe become like a future ambassador, kind of like Morgan here, who's like 19. Morgan is an ambassador for this. She's every bit an ambassador than our, other hatters out there. But shout out to all of you, and I certainly appreciate your contributions to the stream. So I'll just keep this going. I will go into the side profile here because I happen to have it. This is my favorite, maybe besides the top profile, but I feel like for me, this is kind of like the big profile shot of like where you see the feather. If it has one, you get to see the bow. Obviously, you can see the wind, the trolley cord there. We talked about that. Me and Morgan were geeking out about that yesterday, because we were just kind of like sharing the love of the trolley cord, right? It really is now, is every bit about aesthetics as it is about function, right? Even more so, right? Because, well, let's be honest. Some of us may have automobiles, right? Or some of us may be taking the subway. We're not walking as much, even though maybe we should. Like, I do recommend walking if you can do it. I think you're gonna thank yourself later if you do go for a walk. If you can't go for a walk, that's fine. We do have the subway, but we know again that chances are we may not need this trolley cord the same way that it was needed back in the day. But in addition to being functional, it is now added because it's an homage to time past, right? When people didn't have cars, they commuted by either walking to work, or they took the trolley. If you had a trolley, we had a lot more trolleys back then. We still have trolleys in like San Francisco and San Diego, I believe. Yeah, this is functional when you're in an open air car, bandying about, trying to get to your destination. So what you would do is you would take that cord, you would unwind that cord, and then you would stick it. You would have that little knot that you would kind of put into one of the loopholes in your shirt or the lapel of your blazer, if that's what your uniform was to go to work. And that way, it ensured that your hat, if it blew away, it wouldn't become somebody else's hat, right? You'd have a really bad day if you lost your hat and you forgot to connect it and it blew away, right? It's kind of like it's synonymous with like a lot of the silent pictures, right? Everybody always sees when somebody like gets blown off, and they're like, or they'll start kicking the hat, right? Yeah, everybody seems like Charlie Chaplin, where he's kicking the bowler out. That's classic, right? That's classic stuff. And that back in the day, this happened because people are like, hey man, I spent good money on this hat and then it just blew away, because of a strong gust of wind. So, because hat makers had to respond to the market, I'm sure they developed this. Now, I don't know when the trolley cord came about. Like, I don't know when it started. So somebody that does know that information, they can share that if they want. But I gotta imagine that it was something that was like when you did like formal, when you surveyed customers, or when customers were like, you know what, I'm writing to Hat Corporation of America, and I'm going to let them know they need to go and fix this issue, because I'm tired of spending money on a new hat. I can't afford to do that. I just think people were a lot more mindful of their money back in the day, right? I think that's because there wasn't as much of it going around, right? You have obviously the Great Depression, and that forever altered the that generation, right? What was the I believe that was the silent generation. Before the boomers was the silent generation. And, boomers obviously benefited from the prosperity post World War II. But prior to that, the parents of the boomers, they were, I think, the silent generation. And they were ones that probably saw the Great Depression, and they never forgot it, right? They handled their finances and their day-to-day, because they knew bad times could happen. They didn't know that there was going to be a boom. They were just like, listen, we lived through it, and our parents lived through it maybe, and I'm going to make sure that I'm wise with my money, because, I want to make sure I survive the next one. Luckily, there wasn't a next Great Depression. We did have the Great Recession in 2008, right around, and that was pretty bad. Obviously, we lived through that. I was alive and well and working, and managed to be okay during the Great Recession. But there was a lot of turmoil, and arguably could have been worse. If it might have been a depression if we didn't take action. I have definite opinions about how we handled the Great Recession. Not all of it favorably. I think anybody that kind of like follows along and knows that history, they might agree with me, they might disagree with me, and that's okay. I will hat tip you regardless. But I have definite opinions about like how well we handled the Great Recession. But I do agree that it could have been a lot worse if we hadn't taken the some of the action that we took. I believe that was Obama. I believe it was Obama that kind of served during that tenure of the Great Recession, and he took the appropriate action. I think the world took appropriate action, because by that time we were already a global economy, right? So whatever was happening in the U.S. was probably something that we either inherited. It was kind of like, again, iterative, right? Something that a little ripple now, a little financial ripple, has a big effect on the global pond. So what happens in the UK, and what happens in Germany, what happens even in other economies, in developing economies, has ripple effects. China, we know what's happening in China is going to have an impact here, definitely, and then vice versa. So like we're no longer siloed. It's like the gift and the curse of the global economy. So anyway, I'm digressing. I guess I'm going on a tangent. Back to the Dobbs 20. So when I saw this again, the hook, we talked about a lot about the hook. When you see a hat, the hook for me was, hey, this is a Dobbs 20, Luke. It's a brown, it's a classic brown color. Besides being dusty, I said I can work with the dust. I didn't see any moth bites. I still don't think I have any moth bites on this hat. Not that means anything. I have some hats that are really moth bitten. And it depends, right? Sometimes I just don't like the pork pie. I think the pork pie hat that I showed, that Dobbs pork pie, had a couple moth bites, but I still love that hat. It's my knockaround hat. And I don't love it any less because it has a few moth love bites on it. Like I just think of it as maybe that moth had a good meal, and left and made my pork pie a little unique, right? Thank you, moth. I think. Just to show you a little bit about like this hat, you can see this is not a pristine example, right? just in case somebody that wants to see what the inside lining. So this is exactly how it looks. It probably still looks this way, only because I don't wear it, like I mentioned, because this is a 7.5, and I tried sizing it down with felt, but it still feels very loose. And who knows, maybe it's an oversized 7.5. So you can see I didn't care. Like, I didn't care about the lining. I saw this and I said, this is still a Dobbs 20. I love it. And then the sweatband was in pretty good shape, and it still is. So you can see here the sweatband, the classic Dobbs 20 logo. Everybody knows that Stagecoach, for Dobbs. Shout out to Dobbs. I think Dobbs is one of those. I got to think that Dobbs and Knox and also Kavanaugh were the big three. They were like the three-headed monster of the Hat Corporation of America, right? Because, again, you just see a lot more Dobbs and Knox around. I feel like Dobbs and Knox are like the two that, in terms of sales, I got to imagine, because of the number of examples that you see out there for vintage hats, I want to say that Dobbs is probably number one, maybe Knox is number two, but maybe it's more even. Because I do see I own several Knox hats. I also own a decent number of Dobbs hats, and that's because they're a lot more out. They're a lot more out there in the wild. So I can only imagine that maybe they were just better sellers for Hat Corporation of America. But then I think in my mind, in the way in terms of my eye test, Kavanaugh is a solid third in that, because I just don't see as many Kavanaugh in the wild than I do Dobbs and Knox. And probably because I think Dobbs, the brand, I know Dobbs, the brand, survived later in, right? And I do have a way. So if you guys are interested in learning this, if you want to kind of have a neat way to tell an older Dobbs from a newer Dobbs, right? All you got to do, I'm going to try to see if I could highlight this here with my little cursor. You see this Dobbs here? You see the little S in Dobbs? So if you want to know an older Dobbs versus a newer one, I want to say like 70s was like that delineation mark. Somebody that knows better can tell you otherwise. But an older Dobbs, right? This you can tell. I could tell is an older Dobbs, meaning pre-1970s, because there's no little R here, right? So if you look at a newer Dobbs, right? Once Dobbs like was on the decline and they started like still making newer Dobbs, right? It was like Dobbs, but like, I guess it was like something that kind of competed with the modern day Stetsons, right? I think, I could be wrong. Somebody could tell me that. I think they still make Dobbs hats, but what you'll see, if you see a modern day or a more modern Dobbs hat, in addition to having a Dodge with a Stagecoach, you will see a little R, which I believe stands for registered trademark. So again, somebody that knows can tell me, but I guess somehow, some way, that was when whoever bought Dobbs and currently makes Dobbs now has done so with the little R. So now it's Dobbs registered trademark. So that's just a little tidbit. This is just something that I learned from my fellow hat nerds on the Fedora Lounge. Shout out again to the Fedora Lounge and my Fedora Lounge lizards that I learned that, So yeah, so this is the mythical Dobbs 20 that I just happened to acquire. And again, I got it not because it was the most beautiful hat I ever seen. Far from it. It was dusty as all get out. But I took a chance because I said, okay, this is my chance to own a Dobbs 20. And now I have one. So just going off of the other part of the sweatband here. So this was another hook for me, right? So when I was looking at the photos, I didn't know who Geo I Eakle was, and I could be butchering that, but I did see Philadelphia, right? So apparently Geo I Eakle was a well-known hat shop in the Philadelphia area. So you can see why somebody like me that like is really big into Americana, right? So obviously I try to be a man of the world, right? I'm into history, but there's a certain like special place I have to like the urban areas that produced either the hat brands, right? And in conjunction to hat shops, right? Let's not forget our hat shops, the producers and also the resellers of these hats. So we all know about Stetson, right? Stetson is a Philadelphia. You even see it, Stetson, a Philadelphia company. I believe that's what it says. So Stetson, Philadelphia is already stamped and legitimized by being the home of Stetson. But in addition to that, Philadelphia, like a lot of other major urban areas, had a fine hat shop, Geo I Eakle. Again, I could be butchering that, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it. Geo I Eakle was just happened to be one of those hat shops for Philadelphia. And apparently here they were on Market Street. They had moved. I think I shared that in the description. Apparently they had a different location, and I think it might have been. Usually these things happen because for two reasons. One, because somehow, some way, the previous location caught fire, and the other one is because business was booming, right, at that time, and they just happened to need a newer space to accommodate like the demand, right? They're like, okay, we started off on this little tiny location, but we're going to expand into maybe a better location that can incorporate more inventory, more employees, and more hat sales. I don't know which one was which for Eakle. I'm sure that's something that I could research, but I don't have it off the top of my head. But yeah, that was the other pull, right? So it was a Dobbs 20, and it was a Philadelphia hat shop. And I just love Philly. Philly's like another one of my and again, I've only been to Philly a couple times, but the city, just kind of like Baltimore, even though I spent a summer in Baltimore, Philadelphia is one of those like cities. And obviously we all know I'm a big fan of Rocky, right? That's another part of Philadelphia that is synonymous with popular culture is Rocky. So, if you are in New York, Morgan, I don't know if you get out to Philly or if you've ever been, definitely make a trip. Only because it's not that long. It's not that much of a trip from New York. I want to say maybe it's 2 hours from New York City. And it's such a beautiful city. It's a gritty city. Don't get me wrong. It's kind of like Baltimore in that it's a gritty city. But there's such a beauty to Philadelphia. And I think Sylvester Stallone was inspired by that as well. Sylvester Stallone does have a family tie, meaning that he spent time in Philadelphia as a Philadelphian. But the city left such an imprint on him that he knew that when he did Rocky, that Rocky was going to be from Philly. And I appreciate that, right? Even though I'm not from Philly, when somebody like Spike Lee, right? When somebody like Spike Lee makes a movie and he showcases New York, right? Like Do the Right Thing, classic Spike Lee film, and we'll show you like the stoops, right? The Brooklyn Stoop is mythical, right? Even people probably outside definitely outside New York, but definitely probably even outside the U.S. may know about the infamous Brooklyn Stoop, and I feel like part of that is because like a filmmaker, an artist like Spike Lee was able to capture it on film in a lot of his iconic movies. And now like even if you didn't know about it before or experienced it like I did, sitting out on the Brooklyn Stoop, you could now do that. Besides the rappers that do it, because it's still something that's iconic for the Brooklyn rappers, right? I think Gorilla Nems is a rapper that isn't from Coney Island. He's also a YouTuber, and he's had videos, right? And everybody remembers Biggie Smalls on the stoop of the Brooklyn Stoop. Shout out to Bedford-Stuyvesant. Shout out to Coney Island, and shout out to Brooklyn and the rest of New York. And obviously Morgan, who's still living there, as well as Kevin. Again, just got back to there. I always have love for the Northeast, even though I live in the Mid-Atlantic now. Again, you can take the boy out of Brooklyn, but you can't take the Brooklyn out of the boy. So, shout out to the BK. Anyway, back to Philadelphia. Again, that was the other hook for me with respect to this hat was, holy cow, I got a piece of Philadelphia here. Besides being a Dobbs 20, it's a piece of Philly. And then we talked about like how to tell the age of a hat. the age of a hat, what year, right? We all know like a lot of my hats by now come from like the 60s. And when I saw this hat, I kind of knew. I was like, this is a 60s hat, right? But it's kind of like Ronald Reagan once famously said, trust but verify, right? Yeah. Shout out to Reagan. And then I did. Because what did I do? I said, okay, this sweatband, this leather sweatband's in good shape. I'm pulling that baby apart and I'm going to peek under the lining and I'm going to snap a photo so I don't have to keep doing that. So that's what I did. This is one photo that I did take myself. And it told me what I kind of already knew. This is a classic Hat Corporation of America label. And for our budding hat nerds or people that are already in the know, you say, Luke, how do you know that? Well, I learned that from the hatedprofessor.com. Shout out to the Hatted Professor and his website. This label is from the 60s because, again, in the 50s, Hat Corporation of America standardized this label, and it just happened to shift. This label is from the 60s, and it's differentiated, right? So you can see the 4 pieces of information here. You have the oval, right? Which is kind of, I guess, the shape, the 2 duplicate number, the block, and the hat size, right? So you see that here, and this is actually unique in that this is not printed. Somebody actually wrote this in. It could have been that maybe this hat was worn so much that that the label, like the print, the original print was faded. Maybe the hat got wet at some point and the print was fading. So the owner, maybe it was the owner, or maybe this got damaged at the hat shop. But somebody wrote in the information that, and obviously they have their own handwriting. I can't read most of it. I can make out the hat size and I can make out kind of the 2 duplicate number. But the rest, I have no idea because it's kind of like in cursive, right? Shout out to my 80s babies that actually got taught in schools like myself how to write in cursive, right? I'm guessing, Morgan, they didn't teach you that in school because that's one of those things when the 80s. I don't know when they stopped doing it, but like I think Generation X, that's one of the other markers that we have that is like archaic now, right? Anybody from the 80s and prior, we were taught, it's like, hey, if you want to be if you want to be taken seriously out in the world, you better learn how to write in cursive. So we did that. And lo and behold, they just stopped teaching. They're like, ain't nobody got time to be writing cursive. And that's probably a function of the fact that nobody writes anymore, right? Everybody types. Everybody texts, word processors came about, then computers, and then cell phones. And then all of a sudden, nobody's writing anymore. So they're like, why are we teaching people to write in cursive? We're not writing anymore. We're typing. So anyway, just unique thing. And I'm sure there was something else that I'm forgetting that was tied into that. So right away, right? So I already knew from the styling, this was from the 60s, right? Based on remember, it's the sweatband, the low profile, relatively speaking, the fact that it's kind of like a stingy brim, all those things kind of told me this is a hat from the 60s, right? But just to verify, I peeled back the onion, right? Or the banana, right? On this hat, whatever you like to refer to it as, kind of like whatever. I'm sure there's like some sort of like weird other thing you could say, but I uncovered the label to reveal this the underpinnings. I looked under the hood. That's what it is. I looked under the hood for my car guys. I peeked under the hood. I saw the label, and you never know. That nice thing also is kind of like a fortune cookie, right? Sometimes you see other things when you look under the hood, right? And I did, right? So besides this label, which I expected to find, what I didn't expect to find was a stamp. Look what I found when I looked under the hood. Those are 2 dates. So like one is more faded than the other, right? So the date, there's an original date there that's a little faded. It says October 31st, 1967, right? Now, presumably, and again, I don't have the answer to this. I don't know what these dates, like who put these dates on there. I don't know if Hat Corporation of America put it on. I don't know if Geo I Eakle put it on. I also don't know if the first owner put this on there. somebody put it on there, likely the first owner or before it got to the first owner. But I do see two dates on there. One reads, and I can make it out based on the photo. It reads October 31st, 1967. And then the new date, like right under it, it says January 4th, 1968. So there you go. So I already knew it was from the 60s. Now, based on the stamp, I'm like, I got even more information, right? When I peeked under the hood, now I know 1967 to 68. So close to the 70s. Again, some people be like, I don't know why that matters, but for me, it matters. I'm like, hey, I want to know that stuff. I'm kind of a nerd that way. So you know what? I don't, I didn't make up nerddom. I just play the role, right? You know, everybody's a nerd in their own way. This is just the way I express my nerddom. And I'll show you one more thing, which I was like, obviously, when I was looking up the history of Geo I Eakle, I came across the name, and it turns out I believe it was the Geo I Eakle's maybe either son or grandson, because it was a family-owned business. And I came across their obituary, you know, again. So I found their obituary, and I'm going to try to blow this up a little bit. Hopefully, I'll read it to you, but only because I was touched when I read it. So obviously, a very sad event. So this is the obituary of George H. Eakle, which I can only assume is the son or grandson of Geo I Eakle. Again, Geo was a shortened version of George, and I'm sure that has like some sort of cultural. There's a cultural reason for why George went by Geo. I kind of like the name Geo. It just sounds cool. I like George too. But apparently the elder George went by Geo, and that's why the store was named by it. But so either his son George H or his grandson George H passed away, and I don't remember what year this was, but I found this, and it says here, George H. Eakle, 88, of Doylestown. Shout out to Doylestown in PA. You know, very like a Philly suburb, very well known. And it says, whose family-run Philadelphia store sold men's hats for decades, died Thursday at Abington Memorial Hospital from complications following a head injury. Oh man, I guess I didn't remember that. Oh, that's tough. That's tough. Yeah, that's really rough way to go. I didn't know that. I just assumed when I first read this that he had died of natural causes. Maybe my brain just didn't want to focus on that. But apparently died following a head injury, which is actually more common than honestly I guess care to think about. Anyway, the family store, the George I Eakle Hat Company at 1628 Market Street, was a local institution until 1981, when developer Willard, and I'll go up here and I'll continue reading this only because I was touched by it. Willard Rouse bought out all the stores to build the Liberty Place complex. Now, again, any of my Philadelphia folks, I'm not familiar with what's called the Liberty Place complex. You know, that just begs the question: does that still exist? Do they still have any remnants from the the Geo I Eakle hat shop that existed prior to that? I have no idea. I can only assume they probably knocked everything down, just like it's probably the course of the day. And they knocked everything out to build this Liberty Place complex. But somebody else can maybe tell me more about that's a local. Anyway, it says here, Eakle loved hats. His wife, Lois Speaker Eakle, said, and there was rarely a moment when his head was not covered with a sharp-looking hat. Love that. And then they had a quote. His wife was quoted by saying, he went to bed without a hat, but that's about it, she said. After retiring from the store that he ran with his brother, Eakle became an avid volunteer at Doylestown Hospital for 18 years. He delivered mail and flowers, and he loved it so much that he and his wife had to plan trips around his weekly visits. That's awesome. This guy sounds like a sweetheart. And he's one that is probably sorely missed in Philadelphia. Without knowing that, I can already tell that this is a guy that was sorely missed. Um, and then she went on to say, he was hooked on it, his wife said. The two were married 32 years ago after his first wife died. In addition to his wife, he is survived by his son, G. Richard Eakle, and a granddaughter. I just wonder if they're still alive and kicking. I mean, it'd be great to like pick their brain about their granddad, right? What do you know about generations prior to that, right? Anyway, it said funeral services will be held at 11 a.m. today at Reed and Steinbach Funeral Home at 2335 Lower State Road, Doylestown. Friends may call after 10 a.m. In lieu of flowers, memorial contributions may be made to Doylestown Hospital at 595 West State Street, Doylestown, PA, 18901. Wow. I don't know about you guys, but when I read that, I knew I had to share that with you guys because I mean, I about did everything but cry when I saw that. I just felt like I knew this man, and I knew what an impact he had on his local community, and on his family. These are folks that, again, maybe he's just, I've met so many great hat people that it's kind of like I just feel like it's related, right? I feel like hats make you a nicer person, or maybe you're a nice person, you get into hats because you're a nice person. Again, chicken and egg, right? I feel like it's iterative, all right? I think they feed on each other, and we have so many great ambassadors in this hobby, and it feels like George H here, and probably his dad and brother, his whole family, just sounds like people that you wanted to know. And you want to give them your money. Like, no wonder they were probably a successful hat shop for so many years. They just seem like salt of the earth type folks. But I don't know. Maybe someday somebody here will be either a insider, meaning they knew the Eakle family personally, or were related to being like a customer. However, or whatever you know about, Eakle, the Eakle family, and maybe even Philadelphia, because I love the city. Like, shout out to Philadelphia. I know they're like a division rival in baseball for the Mets, but great city, great people, great food. Again, I know they have a tough reputation, but so do a lot of people. Tough times makes for tough people, I say. So shout out to Philadelphia. This is my little piece of Philadelphia that I'm sharing with you. And if you haven't had a chance, if you know Philadelphia even better than I do, you probably can see some of the allure. I pay homage because again, that's home. That might not be home to me, but I have enough access to Philadelphia, and I've been there, and I know of the Philly cheesesteak, right? So if you go to Philadelphia, you got to have a cheesesteak. I don't care if you like Geno's versus Pat's, or they even have other Philadelphia, cheesesteak stores that are probably just as good. But shout out to Philadelphia. Shout out to the cheesecake. Oh my gosh, I want a cheesesteak so bad right now, right? I haven't eaten breakfast. I'm like fasting right now, but I'll have something to eat probably before I head out to the ballpark. But yeah, that was my little contribution for today. Again, I'm just sharing my hat journey with you guys. I'm sharing a little bit about myself. And every little show, I try to maybe reveal a little bit more, and let you get to know Luke, the person, Luke, besides Luke, the hat collector, Luke, the dad, Luke, the traveler, right? Luke, the watch nerd, the many faces of Luke, as lovely as many of them may be. Like you guys chose to be here, so apparently it can't be that bad. But shout out to all you guys. Shout out to Morgan. Shout out to Ian for joining us again. And then shout out to anybody that might view this video sometime in the future, right? Again, I welcome you. The only thing I don't ask for much. The only thing I'm gonna ask for is if you can, if it's not too much trouble, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, maybe even hit the notification bell if you want to get an alert every time I go live. So like if you want to be a part of this when it's live, I welcome you to hit that notification bell. If you don't, if you just want to find me, when you find me, then you can maybe hit the subscribe button and the like button instead. Only because, not because I'm like an egomaniac, I hope I'm not. But essentially what I want to do is I want to make sure that YouTube recognizes my channel and can recommend it. It becomes part of the algorithm. So when YouTube uses their witchcraft, right, to be able to come up and recommend this video to somebody else, I actually found out from a friend that he found my video literally like randomly. I literally did. My buddy Danny, shout out to Danny if you're watching this. Danny, I was hanging out with him last night at the Mets game at Nats Park, and he says, "Dude, I totally found your channel by accident. I was listening to you, and I was like, you said something," and I'm like, he was just listening to me. He wasn't even like watching me. He was listening to me without knowing me, like I was the guy talking here. And he's like, "Who the heck is this?" And then he looks and he's like, boop, 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 boop. "Holy cow, that's Luke. Like, what are you doing with a YouTube channel?" And then he sends it out to his partner, and she's like, she didn't recognize me either. She was like, "Is that Luke?" It's like, when did Luke have a YouTube channel? So I didn't like advertise to a lot of family and friends because I didn't want to feel bad. I was like, I didn't want to like obligate them, kind of like I don't obligate anybody here. Like I have a really weird thing of like not wanting to obligate my friends and family to like, listen to me talk about hats because, a lot of them are not hat people. So, sometimes my sister, like if you've seen some of my early, my early videos, I have my sister coming on here. She's probably been the only family member that like bothered to check my videos out. And she do it while she's working. Like, all right, my sister teaches driving school. She's a driving school instructor in New York City. And she'd like on my early episodes, she'd like put it on while she's like instructing the students. So like, not just is she listening to me, but students listening to me and laughing at like some of the stupid things I come up with, at the time. Anyway, shout out to Patricia and to the rest of my family. I appreciate the support. Again, you're not obligated to listen to my channel and subscribe, but if you do, I appreciate it. Just shout out to everybody. Like I said, if you're a future hat nerd that watches my video, and somehow this helps you become a bigger hat nerd, drop me a comment. Like I need that kind of stuff. It's like food for me. So anyway. We're approaching an hour and a half. I'm probably just going to cut this off right here, right now. I just feel like this is a good stopping point. I barely got any of my fizzy drink. I'm on my fizzy drink phase. Again, shout out to Aldi, who's not a sponsor, believe it or not. I would love a sponsorship from Aldi. But this is the Bellevue fizzy drink, apparently the cheapest fizzy drink I could find by the 12 pack. And, I started off with bubblies. And then I found this and I said, okay, this is kind of like bubbly, but cheaper. So I'm going with this. Shout out to Aldi for actually giving you some value. If you don't have an Aldi, hopefully you get an Aldi soon. Maybe you have a Lidl. Lidl is also pretty good. I just happen to shop at Aldi because that's the nearest one. I think I have a Lidl close by now as well. But both pretty great German-based supermarket. Anyway, Ian, thank you again. Shout out to Ian and shout out to London. My London folks, besides Ian, all my folks in the UK, past, future, and present. God bless from the US. I love the UK. I love all of my international viewers. But I will come out and visit one day. I don't know I don't know how much ground I'm gonna cover when I get out to the UK. But London is definitely gonna be one of them. I want to see some of that fog, right? Like there's that brand London fog. Like everybody knows, like even if you know nothing about London, you know about the London fog, right? And obviously Big Ben and all the other stuff that there is to see out your way. But I'm gonna see it for myself one day, and maybe I'll make it out to Christie's and to Lock and Company. you know, again, that's part of my history now, and I want to be a good historian. And maybe I'll snap a couple good photos, and maybe I'll meet some folks like Ian here and catch some of his music. Anyway, I got 4 people in here. I'm still gonna close this out unless you know, I just feel like this is a good time. If you didn't catch my hat journey, today's hat is the Dobbs 20, made for Geo I Eakle in Philadelphia. So shout out to my Philly folks. You know, if you're out in Philly, go grab a cheesesteak with lots of onions, and then I will hopefully vicariously eat that, enjoy that with you. I won't get a cheesesteak out in Nats Park. I'll probably get a pretzel, and I'll have like the world's priciest beer. But maybe I can get my son to pay for another one, right? Yeah, get me a beer, Chris. Thank you. Anyway, this has been Hat Chat number 15. We are at the 1-5 mark. You know, I'm like, who knows? Are we gonna get to 100 at some point? Like I feel like the way we're going, we're gonna be hitting triple digits before we know it. I mean, I run out of hats well before that, but hopefully this is gonna keep evolving, and I will have some brand new content, and I'll get you some guests. I promise. I already got folks. I already got Paul that agreed to come on here. Kevin Gerber agreed to come on here. We got Johnny, my boy Johnny, who is a new YouTuber, by the way. So besides following Passion for Hats and Hats and Guitars, please follow Johnny, you know, on YouTube, because he's a fellow hat nerd that's just getting started. I think he's got a handful of subscribers. Help him out. Check out his channel. Check out his collection. Let him know that Luke sent you, that good Luke sent you, and that we look forward to watching the collaboration between good Luke's and Johnny. Right? It's like the song, "Who is Johnny?" or "Johnny Be Good," right? So shout out to my nostalgia here. I love happy music. You know what I mean? Like I love that. I like snappy, right? It's like snappy music, right? Anyway, this has been Luke for Hat Chat number 15. Thank you so much for watching me and sharing your part of your day with me. And on to the next one, which is probably tomorrow, as long as my voice allows. This is Luke signing off for Hat Chat number 15. And in the meantime, I can only say, stay hatting, my friend. All right. Ciao. Have a good one.